Hey, hey, how is everybody today? How are you guys this
Hey,
week?
Mike, can I buy you a link?
You can, dude. I would love you to
Ooh,
buy
I
me a
like
link.
that shirt.
Someone
You got
told, yeah, this is like a local grocery. I just saw it, but I show it to a local friend. He's like, it looks like a cervix. I was like, what? I'm gonna have to take this off and look at it.
Cervix.
Now that's all I can see.
It's like a Disney movie with all the
Yeah,
the
yeah, where it
subliminal
spells the crap and
imagery.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
So, today we were talking, Corey and I were talking about it a little bit yesterday, and we were talking about risk tolerance in our industry and business in general, which I actually think is pretty interesting because if you look at our SEO processes, it's involved in almost every step. But like for me, do you guys differentiate between risk tolerance and risk appetite, or not? I
I
that's
would
one thing
consider those two the same thing.
I kind of, from I guess if outside of the investing world, I think it is to me. I think they're the same thing to me. What about you, Fletch?
Well, I do what I do, which is I try to look at things through different lenses, and the kind of primary lens I go to is to try to understand strategy. Right, we've all got a certain amount of resources that we can allocate differently, and the first thing I try to do is to understand, even like you posted, right, for people that aren't one of the four of us. Mike's like, hey, let's talk about this yesterday, and so I when I went to work on trying to understand what I might contribute or how I would look at this, I tried to take those words apart and that phrase apart to understand even what it means, like really what those words point to. And so as we go on today, I'll probably talk more about that. But like when you talk about risk, it really points to something uncertain, right? That you don't necessarily know is going to turn out the way you want it to. And then tolerance is some kind of psychological element that means I can deal with it. And then if we apply that to business or life or whatever else, then they take on some different connotations. And so as we kind of unpack this today, I'll probably talk a little bit more about those and how I pulled those words apart to understand what they point to. And then kind of go into a couple different lenses probably that I looked at this from to help people see maybe how I look at this and how I manage it and how I approach it and the decisions that get made. Really, because it's not a term that's really common in my world, not the industry, but like my personal world. I really haven't looked at it through those specific avenues of the words pointing to the meanings and what they are. So
It's
yeah, I'm kind of excited to talk about this. Yeah.
it's interesting because as I started looking at it and actually kind of putting it into our industry and looking at it specifically, I realized that like inside of everything we do, lead generation agencies, almost every aspect of what we do, there is a decision we have to make that is directly impacted by our risk aversion or risk tolerance or appetite, whatever you want to call it. Looking at it from just a plain like client sales, or say we've had actually closed the client and we're starting to do our onboarding call, understanding your client, their risk tolerance and their risk acceptance or aversion is extremely important, because even within like building links or just purchasing links, there's different levels of tolerance that you need to do certain tactics, right? So
Just go white hat and don't build links, and there is no risk, right?
right. Well, also, if you look at paid linking,
Well, the risk at that point is failure.
Yeah.
right.
There
There
is
you
risk.
go. That's interesting.
The failure and the fact that you're still going to be affected by updates. So, I mean,
Right. It's not a guarantee that all of a sudden it's not going to change like it just has, and you're not going to drop because now you're off topic for your corpus or your domain or whatever.
Well, in any realm, nothing is 100% guaranteed, I guess, until after it happened, and then you could still make an argument even after it happened, I suppose.
No, and directly in that link building, if you think about it, you can go buy a guest post, or you can go do outreach for a guest post, or you can pay for a guest post. Now that's a decision right there. But then you can also go say, well, I don't want a guest post. I want to do outreach for an insertion, or pay for an insertion that they know about. Or I can go and I can buy some hacked links, right? So there's all these levels of acceptance in almost absolutely everything that we do that we can break down, it looks like. And I think understanding where those are and having the knowledge to know where that line lies is extremely important as any sort of marketer in even just our industry, you know?
Well,
So.
Mike, what you pointed to right there, you talked about like one of the things that I've actually got, you know, a couple pages of things I, you know, built and thought about as we, you know, as you brought that up and I kind of fleshed it out. Like one of the things that people don't consider is that your risk goes down with the more competence you have. And so what might be risky for some people because they don't necessarily know enough yet to see certain distinctions that are important, may not be as risky for other people who know more about what they're getting into and what they're putting in their campaign and all that type of thing, right? And I kind of get the sense as you kind of opened this up and started talking about it is fleshing that out, not just with you, but with the person you're working with in a project or a client or something like that. But one of the things that you can do, because risk tolerance or what was the word you used, Brad? Appetite, right?
Appetite
like,
for destruction.
Yeah, a little GNR right here. Okay. Like one of the things you can do that will minimize that is to become competent. And you will wind up with less risk in the actions you take that you need to take to get over that threshold again, because we talked about just pure white hat on site, whatever, being very low risk, but the risk you incur is not getting results. So
and I think specifically looking at something like SEO tools or like link building tools or a tool like Scrapebox, the more knowledge you have, the more you understand, the less risky things like those become. You know, Brad has a great story about a client asking us.
Scrapebox?
Yeah, tell that story, dude, because I mean, this is the example of, like, it's a great tool. I love it. But when it's in the wrong hands, Brad can give a good example of what happens.
Yeah. So we signed up a client, and they were a marketing agency specifically primarily for SEO, because they were targeting rehab. And at the time, they had just instated LegitScript, which is why they were shifting their focus to SEO, because they were selling leads and stuff before. Yeah. So they were outsourcing. I found out that they are outsourcing 100% of their SEO for the rehab facilities, which we had a wealth of experience in. They were outsourcing 100% of the SEO they were doing to another company. They were making, I'm pretty sure it's 80%, but just to be safe, we'll say it's a 70% margin. Or no, they were paying 70 to 80%. Yeah. So they were just making a 20 to 30% margin. So I came in, I knew what we could do. I said, okay, yeah, we could do this for a 50% margin. You're going to increase everything like crazy. And they're like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So we got all their clients, which it wasn't a ton because they just shipped to SEO. So then their SEO expert in-house came to them with Scrapebox and said, look at all these great, I can build this many links like in a day. Isn't this fantastic? More links equals better, right? So Rob calls me. He says, hey, Brad, and this is my contact, not the main SEO guy. He's like, have you ever used Scrapebox? I was like, yeah, on occasion. What the fuck are you using it for? And he says, well, I can't remember his name. We'll call him Larry. I know it wasn't Larry. Well, Larry is our SEO guy, and he just said that he found out that we can use Scrapebox and build all these blog comments, and that'll help, right? I'm sitting, like, I'm driving, and when he called me, so I had gotten home by that point. I'm sitting in my driveway. I'm like, you didn't run Scrapebox yet, did you? And I can hear Larry in the background, something like, no. It's like,
they had definitely run it, and this quote is perfect from you here. I think that hits it to a T with what Fletch was saying there. What's interesting is it makes me think about, like, yesterday. There's someone in here who's a like YouTube content creator and an SEO that I respect a lot, and he pointed out some bannings that were happening on YouTube, and there were specific reasons that were very obvious once he pointed out like what he had seen. But with that knowledge actually came some stuff that I think has opened up some things, and I'm not going to ask him to share anything here, but that kind of knowledge, it just goes back to the knowledge that we have, like paying attention to our market, and this is really good for SEOs that are newer. Is when you're in SEO and you're in a market, if you're doing video, if you're doing imagery, whatever you're doing, paying attention to what's going on to the users around you that have a higher risk tolerance, that understand like, okay, I'm doing something that is pushing the boundaries, and watching what happens to them is a great way to find things that you can push the boundaries on without getting in trouble, right?
That way you're not the pioneer with the arrows in your back, right?
Right.
You're kind of.
I think when it comes to taking risks in business and work stuff, I think it always points back to the risks that you've taken in your life. So, and the perspective on taking a risk is like, the first one is, I'm pretty comfortable. I've got my job. I've got my income. I could risk going out on my own. I could risk something like that, and then maybe I'll have a little bit more of a reward than I have now. Now that's one perspective, and that's the perspective that a lot of people approach going into business with, and then they're back working their comfortable job because they're like, things are pretty good. I might risk it to do this. On the other side, the people that take bigger risks are the ones that look at life and say, what do I risk giving up in the things that my dreams in life that I want? I risk not living them, and I risk going to the grave without having fully lived and fully actuated and fully given my kids what they deserve, and my family and my wife, and living the life that I feel like God put me here to live. And in order to do that, I've got to take some major calculated risks that you look at it and you're like, man, this could sink me. And you walk into that fear, and then you realize that, well, maybe that risk that you like on the day-to-day, those risks that you take, maybe you're only like 1 or 2% of the needle are going to move it. You're not going to end up dead. You're not going to end up homeless by taking a risk here and a risk there. But ultimately, I think it goes back to just your foundation, like what's going on inside your heart as far as how you're approaching life in general. Are you a risk taker who just, somebody who knows that when things are too good and you're comfortable, that's when you feel the most worried. You know that you're not.
It's like the market. When the market's at all-time highs, there's nowhere to go but down, theoretically, typically. I mean, you can keep going up, right. And you're like, something's got to give. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I think this is one of the places where kind of the self-help world and the kind of rah, go attitude has misled people in it, kind of like Gary Vee, right, really talks about, like, going after it and getting after it and all that kind of thing.
Crush it.
Like the people that we hear about are the people who took risks and won. We do not hear about the people who took risks and failed. Why?
Or
because they are not on the radar. They did not win. They have no audience. They have no one to listen to them. They're the old person sitting at the coffee shop who are like, keep your
be careful
stable base, so to speak, right? Yeah. Because that's the lesson they learned. Like, but unless you have a personal relationship with folks like that, what we tend to, I think, have exaggerated in our culture, and especially with social media, is that you've got to take big risks to win big. And I know personally a lot of people who have not taken big risks at all and won big.
Well, the concept in investing is you want to take, and just everything, you want to take, if I win big. If I lose, I don't lose that much. And if you can find bets like that continuously, then you're good,
Yeah, Nassim Taleb wrote a book almost exclusively about that.
The Stadia Investor or whatever. Is that who it is?
Yeah, I'd have to look and see what the exact title is, but yeah, it's up there. But anyway, that concept is like, I can win big with this investment. I can only lose small. So, okay, I do that, and there's an 80% chance I'm going to win. But when I win, I'm going to win
There you go. This is what I was thinking of.
500%.
That's not the guy you said.
No, that's a different one. Yeah.
But same concept. Yeah.
It's a principle, right? And so a lot of people probably have identified the principle and written about it from their perspective. And so, you know, from my perspective, I tend to stay I tend to try to stay very safe. It doesn't always work out that way. There's things I don't know that I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and the unknown. Yeah, that's why I always say the most dangerous SEO is a relatively new SEO that thinks they know enough to just crush it. Like the Scrapebox story. You know, it's like
it's
link's good.
Because Brad and I had a conversation yesterday about, like, you know, some projects or whatever, and I'm not risk averse at all. Like, I have a very high risk tolerance, like, naturally, just always have. And Brad's super not risk averse really either, more so than me, I think. But when it comes to certain things, like we're talking about this one thing, he's like, well, yeah, let's just do this way because I don't want to put money into it. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to put money into that either. And so I think that it actually kind of it breaks down into individual areas of our lives where we have different levels of tolerance based on not necessarily just our experience, but also like our values of, you know, is this more important than that? And I would rather put a little bit more work and a little bit more time into something than actually risk funds on it if it's something that's not a sure bet. So it's a very broad topic that kind of trips me out, actually. I was looking at it from a competitive research standpoint, and what I think people forget to see when they're doing competitive research is that if you're looking at the profile of a competitor and you see certain link building tactics that they're using, and you can identify a high risk tolerance, then it's a trigger I realize that it's a trigger for me to start looking for other tactics that people use that are much better hidden than the link building aspect of it. So I think, like, even in competitive research, like, it becomes something that's a huge factor of thinking about it and understanding that a competitor who has a low risk tolerance might just be writing good content and going and doing outreach. That's a competitor that's very easy to attack and take over. But if you have competitors that are willing to hack your server and bring your site down,
that's not fun. Yeah.
So it's important, especially even researching a market to go in. Like, there's markets I won't go into anymore because I know there's certain tactics that are used that I just can't compete with being an American citizen, right? If I do some of the things that they're doing, I can go to prison, you know? So it's important to understand because it'll tell you a lot, I think, about the people you're working with and the people that you're working against, you know? It's pretty
well, and that point's really to not getting into games you know you can't win, right? Like, as you kind of you pointed at, like if you can do some competitive research and understand what other people are doing, is that a risk any longer? Right? It may not be a risk on the performance side, the results side, but if you live in a place and have a moral compass that says, okay, I acknowledge that I'm not going to cross the line of individual property rights and hack people's sites and do these kinds of things, then that's not a game you can win if that's what everyone who's winning is doing. So by understanding that, you can understand better how to operate in safe places that work for what you're willing to do to win, right? And what you and this isn't just the win on getting the client the ranking. This is winning, like, in life, right? And having a life that you can say, yeah, that I'm happy, I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm not infringing on property rights, but maybe everything else is on the table. So, you know, and that's what I was kind of alluding to when I talked about competence. As you begin to understand these things and unpack them more and more, the risk goes down because you see other people are doing them and they're getting results. And so you understand there's more territory you can operate in and do things with than you may have been doing before. And that's why, you know, having some chops and some skill in knowing what to look for and how to identify strategies other people are using. If you know your own personal guidelines as far as what you're willing to do, then all those are on the table as well, right? And it just lets us begin to expand the areas where there really is very low risk, but we didn't know that before. And so, when I do a lot of research on a particular project, looking at what other people are doing that are winning right now and have been winning for a long time, and then I combine that with what I know, the area I can operate in expands greatly, which means I can operate in low risk environments to a much greater extent than I could without having done that research.
This is interesting because this blind eye right here for certain markets, it's absolutely true. They have a blind eye for certain people as well. They have a blind eye for whatever is beneficial to them. Also, though, with what's interesting is the way that SEO works and the way like Corpus works. If you're in a market where everyone's doing something that's super shady, that's the norm for that market, guys. Like
Right.
that's not necessarily.
And that's the market that's typically going to get hit. And the reason why everyone's doing shady shit is there's more money in it, where maybe you're better served just going wider in a smaller market and covering more ground. And if it's safer, if it's paying a consistent, $3 to $5K a month, and you don't have to do shit with it. I mean, that's, take that check.
Right.
I will say that if you look at risk tolerance from a way of like you're willing to go just a little bit further than the market you're looking at, and you realize that these people are just using, if you build it, they will come, and you're willing to go buy links, like you're stepping into a playing field where you're the big guy on campus, and you have the skills and the tactics and the connections to knock this out. I mean,
And the budget.
What's that?
And the budget.
And the budget. No, absolutely. Like the relationships, business is all about the relationships, the knowledge and the tactics that you can use and the services you have. I mean, when you have a cheaper link cost than someone else, and you step into a market where everyone's buying links, but you're buying links at 80% less than everybody else, they cannot compete with you anymore. Like they can if they have the budget for it. But there's markets you can find where they don't have the budget for that, and you can come in and undercut the market and take over like that.
Well, and that's exactly why we have these, national authority sites that have like, $1 million a month SEO campaigns, like Yelp and some of these other national sites that are just, their SEO is on point, and but they bring in so much revenue through that channel, they reinvest it, and it does exactly what the promise of SEO is that you get that free traffic, and you keep you do the work once, and then you get paid multiple times over and over.
Zillow is a perfect example of that for the local markets. Zillow crushes everything.
Yeah, exactly. Redfin and like a lot of these guys, but I think when it comes down to like really looking at how to approach risk, I think, or how to view it is just like, what is the amount of personal responsibility and how much are you willing to put your name on the line for something? And I think that is a good assessment of where somebody's at when it comes to taking risks. Because like if something goes wrong, you're the girl or you're the guy that people are going to come running to if something is messed up. And because you've put yourself out there as the responsible one, as the one who's out in front in the limelight, who's taken personal ownership of everything that's under your control, all of the campaigns, how you run your business. Like when you take full ownership of that and start realizing that nothing in the world is happening outside of your life that has not first happened right here. So you can't blame circumstances, you can't blame the market, you can't blame a lot of these things, and you set those things down, and you pick up the fact that everything that happens and is going on in my life I take personal responsibility for the good, the bad, and then from there, that's when I think that you can really start to look at things and say, okay, where do I want to go, and then what risk do I need to take in order to get there? So, I think it definitely is a framework that will transfer into how you approach business and how you, just everything in life. Like I think risk is more of it's something that you can bake into your DNA, but it's going to be like Mike said, that he's got a huge tolerance for risk, but that's not just in doing SEO. Right. That's in everything.
Luckily, he doesn't gamble that I know of.
Yeah. Luckily, he doesn't ride. Luckily, he doesn't ride motorcycles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's interesting is
he just rides vans.
a lot of the revenue that we've been able to pull in from like larger corporations, at least I'm thinking of like 3 campaigns right now I can look at specifically, is because of risk tolerance and being able to communicate that to them, and then also show them how they can be protected from certain aspects of a campaign. And take it like lead generation and selling calls. If you set up a company in between your agency and the person who's buying it to filter that out, you actually have a filter of risk for the purchasing company, for the tactics that if you're using tactics that they're not normally comfortable with. It is very possible to make them comfortable with that when you explain how that risk could affect them and how to mitigate that risk, utilizing clever registration of companies and various things like this. And if you look at any major corporation and look at their structures, look at subsidiaries and certain things, like when they want to get into a certain market, but it is going to be detrimental to the parent company, they create a new company, right? So it flows down like everywhere, and understanding it is key to being able to mitigate it, right? And
well, what you mentioned right there, Mike, it really points back to SEO being a relatively new area where a lot of people are working. But these are strategies that have been in place for a long time in the business world, in the corporate world, and with LLCs and subsidiaries and wholly owned companies and
look at like Disney,
kind of
how,
and how many different companies they own. And it's like, okay, we're going to acquire this asset, this entity over here, and they're going to be able to do different things than we do as the parent company, but it's all going to feed and work together.
It's going to be synergistic.
And one of the things that Mike brought up was like kind of talking to the client, right? And one of the things that I try to do is I try to get myself into the position of the person I'm going to be working with, their business, right? I want to treat it as if I own the business, but not as if I own the business, as if they own the business. And then I'm this extra thing that I'm looking back at myself with. And when you talk about mitigation strategies, you can start to see that when you need to have those in place, when you don't. And Corey was kind of mentioning the same, something along the same lines, or that really kind of fed into it, which was, it's really kind of like, however risk tolerant I am, and I tend to probably fall on the end of the spectrum that Mike falls on, as far as what I'm willing to do. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to operate that way with every contract or agreement that I have with a client. It just means that I'm willing to do certain things, and it's okay. I can live with that, but it doesn't mean I want to treat the project the way I would treat the project, as if I own the business. I might try to help them see some things that we can do, but really trying to change someone's core DNA in a sales call, it's probably not going to happen. So understanding kind of where you are and what you are able to do and what you're willing to do, but then also really understanding kind of where they are and where they come from, and understanding that hey, they're not going to move much. What can I do? What can I put in place to help them kind of stay where they are while getting results that I bring to the table? That's really my value, right? And I get paid for my value, and how I can help them see what I bring and what the offer actually is. It's I won't say overlooked, but I think the more people consider that and think about that and work it into the conversation they have with potential projects and clients, the better off you're going to be. Because if nothing else, you're going to start to learn to navigate your own mind and realize it's a certain thing, right? It's operating a certain way, and other people's operates a different way. And until you can really get into somebody else's shoes and understand what they're doing and how they're doing it, there's going to be a breakdown in that communication. And then that breakdown in communication is going to mean they really cannot see the value you bring, which means you cannot charge what you could charge otherwise for it.
Yeah, and that all goes to like how you pre-frame them, and then how you future pace them for how the campaign is going to go. And when you have your your sales process really tuned out, even the pre-sales part of it, where you're pre-selling them even when you're asking questions before you even pitch them.
Yep.
Like I think you'll take care of a lot of that, and if somebody gets to that point and they still aren't ready to buy, then you've done everything you can. They're not going to buy from you. They're not going to buy from anybody. And I think that's a huge thing in sales, is that, look, if this person is closable, you better be closing them. Because and I always say, like, if I can't close them, then they're not closable. Nobody's going to close them. I've probably had,
and it might come down to in that case, it might come down to a budget issue. Maybe they can't afford you.
Well,
and they don't understand how much time, effort, and knowledge goes into SEO. They think it's going to be a 97 a month campaign, and that's not realistic. I mean, I could take you 97 a month, but just don't ever contact me again.
You can scrape box it for that.
That's what you're going to get for 97 a month. Scrape box one time.
Very true.
Yeah.
What's interesting is Corey also, when he's talked about sales in the past, when people are starting to talk about, like, and you're asking people when you're selling them, have you had SEOs in the past? You're directly going after their risk acceptance and tolerance right there, because just hiring an SEO again after being burnt by another SEO.
How many times? What percentage, in your experience, Corey, just ballpark, have been burnt by an SEO? Like, people that you're on a call with, what percentage have been burnt by? It's got to be huge, right? I know you talk to a lot more potential clients than me.
Probably 70%. Like, I've worked, the clients that are my main clients that I work with, like national e-commerce or publicly traded companies. Some of them have never worked with an SEO company before. They've only done PR, which, as you know, is like the best. Perfect.
Yeah,
it's the best
That's
website.
A wet dream.
Yeah. So they don't have a bad taste in their mouth. They've probably heard stories, but I mean, it's still a foot that I like to lead on those, because. But then on the other side, it's like, okay, do I want to really do business with somebody who's been burned by bad SEO? Because that means that they didn't really do their homework. They didn't, they weren't watching the needle. They weren't paying attention to these barometers of their business. That now they're all of a sudden they're like, well, they might have too much of an expectation now on what you're doing. And I'm actually in a situation.
They want you to save them.
Right. Yeah. I've had conversations like that. I got to move back in with my ex-girlfriend if you don't come through for me this month. And I was like, all right, I'm going to refer you to Brad.
Then I answer, yeah.
To get back onto the current state of SEO, talking about risk tolerance, risk mitigation. With the current update, there's been an emphasis put on the tier 2 in your link profile, right? Like, there's definitely more of an emphasis coming in here. And that really does come down to how you break down. It breaks into these tiers that we're doing for SEO, whether you're doing 2.0s, edits, and just whatever. When you're tiering, what you're doing is you are creating a buffer of quality that is mitigating the risk of the link profile to your site, right? So you have your quality on tier 1 that is hitting your site. You have a tier 2 that you should now be really kind of focusing on quality, just like that tier 1. But after that, what you have to start thinking about is, well, now my third tier is the second tier from my first tier, right? So what I do on my third tier, what's that?
I said I'm not that good at fractions.
No, right? So what I do on my third tier, do I need to go as quality as my second tier, or can I start lowering this? And where can I throw in the kitchen sink, right? Where can I throw everything at it? And the way you set that up actually affects the way that the site is going to rank. Like how you set up those tiers, how you build those links is directly going to affect how the site responds as the bot kind of crawls up the quality chain to the top, right? And what's that?
No, that's I mean that goes back to, like, that's some old school stuff that when you start talking about tiered links, going back to the second and the third tier. So what are you suggesting then, Mike, as far as the build out of a campaign then when it comes?
That's why I love the edits, man. That's why I love insertions, right? Because you're getting that quality all the way down, essentially. Yeah, quality is relevant to the market you're in, and so here's the thing: quality is relevant to the market you're in. That's why a lot of people say I want relevance, because if you have relevance, if you're looking at like how site is doing in its own market, and those are the links you need, then the metrics are falling in line with that corpus or that knowledge domain, right? Like you've got links from relevant sites, then you know that those sites probably have the right metrics for the market that you're in. However, you can go and grab a non-English link from a different market that has the right metrics for the market that you're in, okay? So edits tend to accomplish that naturally, right? Now, there's people out there that still use like GSA SIR like crazy, and they do extremely well with it, but they're not going direct to site anymore. They're taking into account what we just talked about, which is your tier 2 is extremely important. So, and we all know that the tier 1 is important, but if we know that tier 2 is extremely important and we know that tier 1 is important, then we want something with quality at tier 1, backed up by something somewhat quality at tier 2, and dropping down, essentially keeping that same quality level down another 2 tiers and then hitting it with the kitchen sink potentially after that. Far enough away where you've got like 3 tiers that or 2 tiers that don't have like just junk right behind it. So I think the best thing that we could tell people right now in the audience is if you're doing your link building like you should be, you're protecting the first and second tier, which means that all the way down to your 4th tier, you're staying somewhat quality, right? Down to the 4th, okay? Because it basically, when you hit that second tier, that 4th tier has to be somewhat quality to be a good tier 2 for that second tier. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Well, and my like, here's something just for people who have not. You got 4 digits for a reason, plus your opposable thumb.
For the tiers,
just in case.
That's the kitchen sink, dude.
This is not something that just began working. What it is something that is now more important than it used to be.
It shifted again. Yeah.
So if you were doing this in 2015, which is kind of a little bit of the way that I kind of started doing things, 2014, it absolutely worked then. It just, I was less efficient with it then because it took more resources for me to do that sort of thing than what other people
You didn't have
do.
to at that point. So why do it?
But I tend to work in local markets with local companies. And so it was extremely safe. My margins were not what they could have been, but the rankings worked then as well, right? And so what's happened with, from my perspective currently, is that algorithm, that factor got kind of increased, got bumped up some, right, with the quality. And we can go into the math if you want to, but that's not for here. But I used to write algorithms, and so I kind of know how these things work. And when you start to change those factors, it pronounces a very different result on your solution, which is page 1 of Google, right? So it really didn't introduce something new. What it did was change the importance of something that had a lower impact on the overall ranking before now. And so, depending on where you are and what you're in and what you want to do with it, if you want to go try to rank for 4X, you're going to have to do a lot more than I have to do with a local HVAC company, right? But it doesn't mean that we're going to be doing different things. It just means that what you're going to have to throw at it is going to be considerably more to earn an income, provide a value, make your money. And I think I have a very open heart, but I am extraordinarily selfish. I want my money for the value I provide. And so the way I approach that is I would like to sell a client once and not have to talk to them again for 5 years.
Exactly.
So
that's the dream, right?
Yeah. For my time, I'd like to know what I'm going to do, what I'm going to offer, and then get that right the first time through, and then be able to ride that value through years where they're benefiting as well as I'm benefiting. Right. And so the recent, kind of core update is, as I look at it, and I kind of, when an update rolls out, what I try to do is to say, if I were the person tweaking the algorithm, what would I do? Right. To get rid of kind of spammy sites, or, okay, like one of the things Google can know, or at least surmise, is that a company that's been around for a long time with a lot of age and a lot of old links is somewhat trustworthy, meaning that if it's on
More
first
so than
page,
a brand new one with brand new links.
that's exactly right. So is it reasonable for Google to put more weight into the age of the domain, the age of the backlinks? And Mike's talking about edits, right? Okay, well, that's a link that's been in place for a long time. It's pointing somewhere different, but at least that there's some seasoning that went on there. It's like Google doesn't want to be radical. They're as liberal as they might be politically. They are not liberal in the way they run their business.
No.
They want it to be something that is very
being that liberal.
And it makes a very good argument for why they either ignore something about a link or they don't ignore it. And that's why, you know, when we've talked about like negative SEO attacks with links, right? Negative, like these link bombs. To some extent, they're not detrimental because they can be ignored, but there are instances where it becomes something you have to address. One of those is if they are throwing terms to you that are outside of your corpus. If you're in, like, say, an online gambling niche or something, and people start throwing keywords at you like Xbox and PlayStation, you know, now you're getting into online gaming corpuses that have nothing to do with your market, that are starting to disassociate you a little bit more. I just lost power, dude. I just lost power. That's funny. So you're getting associated with something that you don't necessarily want to be associated with. But the key thing I think to take away is that for the most part, if we know that they're looking for quality and they can tell these quality signals, they don't have to penalize you because of these age domains that have all these links from back in the day, things that were working years ago. They're not necessarily evil on purpose, and they don't necessarily want to penalize people. Penguin was a big ass issue. It was a horrible thing that they did. And if they continued to do that kind of thing and damage businesses like that, I think it would continue to hurt their reputation. So ignoring things that are not quality while paying attention to quality is actually in their best interest, in my opinion. Yeah. So what you said right now, to me, I think people really should we've always said, and I know everyone here has said it, look at where the money is for them. The money's in their reputation. How does it make sense for them to reward people that do what their terms of service say? Over time, if you build content that gets shared on social media, you will pick up quality backlinks, but you don't pick up as many crappy backlinks necessarily. So crafting this along the lines of what fits their kind of how they're crafting the internet really does make sense when you're looking at the updates that they do. So when someone does throw you, oh, this is what's going on with the new update, use that thinking brain like Fletch just said, because it's important to understand.
So,
yeah.
To shift gears, the homie right here, Matt, asked a question, and he's new to SEO, and he first you know he was like, all right, I'm ready to bet on myself. He's got two little girls. And he was like, just wants to own more of his time. And this might speak to a lot of people that are sitting here, like watching this right now, just thinking that, you know, you're getting started, and it's always exciting. It's always a little bit scary. And but then there's all these different voices that come at you, right? Like, okay, do I do client SEO? Do I do lead gen? I think he dropped several $1,000s on a lead gen course, and they told him, screw client SEO. You don't want to do that. You want to stay as far away from that as possible. And he's telling me this, and I'm like, that's terrible advice. My perspective, and I know I'm going to throw it out to the three of you guys, but the quickest money is going to be client SEO. And then when it comes to the other, you know, affiliate or doing some lead gen, pepper in some of that other stuff. Like, I think that should be part of your portfolio. You should have several different kind of channels coming 100%. In with your skills. But the focus that we all have, mine is like 90% client, and then some affiliate and some lead gen. What about you guys?
I really think that my risk tolerance is crafted the way my portfolio is, and it always will lean towards lead generation and affiliate, because I like not having to rely on someone else's decision. When you have a client, you're relying on their success and their whims. If they have a bad day and they just decide that they're done with something, they can cut off the revenue like that. However, that said, when you are starting, you don't have connections, you don't have these campaigns that are actually not going into like a company and they're skimming you when you're doing your call sales or your lead sales.
I'm dealing with that at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a big risk when you're just starting out, and the revenue is extremely important to where it comes in and goes, because they can take away your revenue afterwards. And a client is, like Corey said, in a very quick way to have some somewhat stable, I'll call it stable in our industry, income. So I would absolutely.
And plus, the PPL versus client work, like Corey said, the fastest way to money would be providing value to clients, going in there, get the quick wins, but you get that check essentially right away, right after you sell them, before you do any SEO, where PPL affiliate, anything like that, you're having to put money in it, your own money up front. And then, so you're not playing with the house's
Brad,
money
what you're
at that
talking
point.
about there, like expand on this if you don't mind, but like you're actually accepting more risk if you're doing lead generation, because you don't have a check. Yeah, you don't have a check in the bank to pay for what you're doing, right?
Exactly.
And so it's really
you're putting up more risk capital with the cash flow positive business. There is with the cash flow positive business, there is no risk capital essentially.
Yeah, but even in lead gen, you still need clients. You need somebody to buy those leads.
Exactly.
And it could be a network, maybe, but like you're gonna make the most if you're selling it directly to like a local, business. Sure. So you still need clients.
I do think they go hand in hand, and that's why we've always taught that you shouldn't separate them, and you should be working client work. And when you can sell leads in those markets as well. You should always be maximizing that revenue. I do think the quickest.
Well, then you're going to know the industry. You're not going a mile wide. You're going a mile deep.
Exactly. And coming in as someone who has SEO skills and can provide that to someone who doesn't have it is a great way to start making money in the industry.
Corey and Fletch are the only two guys in this room that have SEO skills. I don't know about.
That's true.
No, it must be just Fletch.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I keep them in my back pocket and try to never use them if possible.
That's why he always wears long sleeves, so he can pull them out.
Yeah. Just
so
one extra card.
This is a great comment. And it goes to what we were talking about. It's not the only way to truly do this, but if you have authorities telling Google that you are now, like if they're dropping a term or one of the words in the anchors are now building you relevance to something that is shifting the overall relevance of your site, it is a huge issue, dude. Yeah, absolutely. It is a bad thing. And that's why when you start doing things where you're optimizing, what was I going to say with this? There's some stuff people do like long tail generation. Like there's people that do like they don't think about it in their spam site generation. They don't think about it in their content generation. They scrape long tails and they don't have a negative list, and they're throwing terms onto the site that just are completely out of what they're trying to target. Like take anytime you go into cognitive SEO and you're looking for like that awesome keyword focus list, you can see long tails that will have like modifiers in there that are completely off topic, man. Because they are like a related term to the main phrase, but they're not related to the intent or topic of the SERPs you're trying to target. And this will destroy your SEO. It is absolutely the best way to screw up your campaigns, man.
Like one of the things with that, Mike, that I think a lot of people who get in and they're kind of fresh or even seasoned people who just aren't really thinking about things this way is that these tools are typically some form of scraper.
Yeah, they are.
That go out and look for the people who are ranking, and then from that provide you with some intelligence as far as reverse engineering what other people are doing who are winning, right? Who are already on page one probably. And so that's one way.
Hint.
Yeah. So there's one way of looking at that and just saying, okay, so if I can be better than those people, I will win. There's also a way to be, there's a way to be better without having any of the negative stuff associated with the people who are winning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a danger to that, which is that Google is doing the same thing. They have a huge scraper and a huge database, and they're just saying, hey, these people are winning, so we're going to compare you with the people that are already winning to see whether or not you're better.
Well, the thing, what you're talking about, Fletch, is like let's say you're using a tool and then there's this huge outlier that's ranking on page one that has like 8,000 links to the page. And then and that skews the kind of the odds of what you're trying to go after, and then you use some of those references, and you're like, okay, the average number of links to a page, for something like this is 1,000 to rank on page 1, and you go out and you try to get 1,000 links. Number one, that just like you said, like you absolutely don't have to go that route. You have to do things.
It's very clear. Think about like if you're using a tool that uses Google itself, like Keyword Planner, to determine your keywords. You're not taking into account that someone out there is bidding without actually controlling what they're freaking displaying for and wasting their budget. And now they're bidding on a whole bunch of irrelevant crap that now you're going in and trying to do SEO off of a PPC mistake somebody made, right? And so like you don't have control over that. And that's why like these keyword tools that are long tail scrapers, that's cool. You can do that, but do it just a simple find and replace with a blank or whatever in Excel for everything that is in your negative list. Get that out, and then you just can't go out and grab everything and throw it into your document, your website, and make it relevant for your SERP. I had a conversation with 2 different people that wanted some help on why they had lost traffic, and they both were like, well, these sites that are ranking on page 1, they're not like relevant to this topic, and so what they didn't see and what they didn't realize is that they were extremely relevant because all of the sites on page 1 talked about the same stuff. Every page had things that these people thought were irrelevant to their terms. They included it on their page. So the important thing to do before you start using keyword tools to go build even like spam sites or content on your sites is to go through the SERPs and look at the intent and what kind of entities that page is talking about. And then okay, these are the ones that are important for this SERP. Anything that shifts the relevance of this page for that, get rid of it and don't put it into your link text. And if you start getting links from authorities or people starting to spam links at you with shifted relevance, then you've got someone who knows what they're doing attacking you potentially, and you need to pay attention, right? So that's a good question or a good statement, man.
Solid on page. I mean, solid content. If you want to be as safe as possible, build out your entity, see where you index, build clusters around your primary terms. It's all the same stuff.
The entity is extremely important. They are rewarding brand harder with this core update for sure. And that doesn't mean big brands only. That means you need to establish like yourself in the corpus as something related to that market, right? So you need to be now seen as you always should do this, but and I'm not saying it's the only way, but you should go out and establish the fact that company A is a red apple company, right? So just make those associations, set up your entity stack, and get your content flowing through that in a safe way, and do that to start, and then really focus on the cluster. Put your content up internally linked properly with some external links that flow down, like we talked about, into tier 3 and 4 quality tier. Build that cluster and start pulling yourself into those mature clusters that are already there. That's why I love edits.
Well, and Mike, we've talked about this on others, but like when we talk about mature, a lot of times that comes with like age, but as the patent's written, it's a little different than just age, right? It has to do with the amount of stuff there that's
understanding.
And
understanding. They just need need to have when you get a new topic coming into search, like there's a new product that's brand new and nobody's ever seen it, like you're an affiliate and you're doing like supplements and there's a new brand, they have to collect data on that brand. So like the quicker you get in there and start providing data and associating with that brand, like we all know a guy who murdered affiliate because this is what he did, Alex Gould.
Never heard of her.
Shit, dude. Like the king of it, dude. Killed
Baltimore,
it.
Damn Baltimore guy.
Yeah, dude.
Blonde.
Straight up, dude, murdered it. Like because sometimes he would have advance notice of what brands are coming out. And when you know this, and you know that there's going to be a new corpus, a new understanding, a new knowledge domain in Google,
Yeah.
and you know they're going to be collecting new data. If you're there first, you're becoming like the seed set for this. Like we talked about seed sets and link graphs. Like this is how
you're actually becoming
yes
the thing Google is trying to understand the rest of the market based on. You
that
are
is
the
really
standard.
why
Yeah.
people say build it and build it and like the return, like the exponential returns on SEO, because if you are a knowledgeable person that has a website that is huge, has a lot of awesome metrics in different markets, and then you know ahead of time that there is something coming out and you are there first, or you start, like you have all this authority to leverage into these new little knowledge domains and be there before it's a problem. So
Mike, who was the? It's not Dr. Oz. It's someone like that. Who did we have a call with?
Dr.
We didn't
Axe?
get the-
Yeah, Dr. Axe.
Exhibit Axe. Yeah, Axe. Yeah, that was the funniest one that I've ever seen. But yeah, that's a clear representation of what like just building an asset and continually piling onto that asset, getting a ton of cash flow, and then taking that and putting it elsewhere to bring even more revenue. And
this is
the
why like
size of
ODYS
that site is
services are so freaking like good, right? Like services where you can go out and get a domain that has, you know, a $50,000 link profile that has already been in the markets you want to be in. It's why expired domains are good, because you have pages that are like in these mature clusters, you know? This is all, it all comes back to like what this is. It's all these relationships of pages.
Yeah.
And so Tasha, to answer your question shortly, understand like what's important in your market, like what the good sites are, and like when Brad identifies a domain to purchase, he's looking at like the seed sites in that market where the links start, the things on page one that Google really trusts that are high level, larger, and start to find those and build your content on page that's linked together in a good manner that also associates as closely as possible to those seed sites. And that's really all SEO is getting your content with the right data on page and the wrong data not on page, and then associating with other stuff off page.
Well, you were talking about Gould getting ahead of the curve. The best live atmosphere kind of thing I can remember is when we used to do the SEO competitions, where we made up a term that made absolutely no sense. Mike and Derek need a vacation, and there were a few others that we ended up doing. And Google is frantically trying to like learn this new market because they see all this content going up, and they can't decide who's first. But that's exactly what, you know, Gould was doing, is, you know, he is becoming the authority in that niche. So, and Alex, yes, you're either extremely late to this week's show or extremely early to next week's.
So we'll end it with this question right here, since it's 11:59. So the answer is, like, I've known Alex from ODYS for quite some time before he was like pushing this service like it's being pushed right now. And this is a service he's always provided to clientele, and also done his own, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, done their own money getting. And the answer is actually very simple, is that they can't be in every market, and they can't do this. And this is, like, since it's a big client thing and they have the system, it's something that they've decided to capitalize on more revenue by allowing other people to grab it.
They had resources going to waste, like when they used to burn natural gas back in the day, or
but
diesel
don't be
as a
told that
byproduct.
they're not cherry picking domains before it comes into their service for what they need. Right?
Yeah.
So
well, they need to set. I mean, if they're getting like fucking badass domains, there's a certain price point that people typically aren't going to go over. So then they get this really good domain. It doesn't make sense for them to put it on the market at that point, because they're going to have to charge so much for that. Either that or devalue everything else that they've got on there. So why not use it yourself?
And I can validate that because, like, Brad and I have marketed with other people, like, tools that we were using internally for a long time that decided to go public. Like, let's go. This might happen again soon too. We might go take something public that we use. And when you have something that works, that makes sense, that has a margin, it really comes down to the margin that's there, right? the margin, like no one's saying that you can't go out and get these domains yourself, because you absolutely can go find these domains if you have the right tool set, knowledge, and budget. Like you could go get these yourself for sure. It is a convenience, and like Fletch was talking about resources, it is a convenience and a resource type thing. Like when someone puts out a content tool,
I could grow my own cow and slaughter it, but I really
Right.
don't want to. Yeah.
So that's a good way to evaluate it. Like knowing, I would say, like anytime you look at a tool that's being sold by somebody, if you can reasonably believe that they are literally selling this tool because there's more money in it for them, but they are also using it themselves, then it's probably a tool that has some really big effect on something. And I would use that as a way to evaluate the things you buy and the services you use for sure. The links that we
like
Yeah,
one of
go
the
ahead.
things I would look at this, like this is a question that I got a lot, right? For the 8 years I was one of the partners in OMG Machines and all this kind of thing. It's like, if you guys know how to do this, why are you selling the information? Right. And it's like, because I am only me, and my ability to manage people or grow a team and get into every single market and try to make sure that's all it's completely unreasonable. I could liken it to somebody that's if you've got a gold mining operation, you're looking for the gold, but then there's a bunch of other stuff that you're pulling out that other people already have a whole system set up to monetize and deal with and do things with, right? And you're buying resources and selling resources.
Shit, you might be able to sell them dirt. You know?
Yeah, Phil,
Exactly.
like there's just so many different things that you can do.
Yeah.
And so
Well, when you contribute to prosperity, then prosper you shall.
yeah,
Yeah.
this
It
podcast,
does
right?
help me to
We're
do
we're this is 4 hours.
How much you
of-
get paid for this?
yeah, right.
yeah.
This much right now, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's cool, right? Because what I know
Well,
is this is stuff that I get something from this every week, right? Listening to what the discussion plays out as. I hope the people who are listening do as well. And it's going to wind up building over time. Like there's people who have contacted me that have seen me on this podcast or a different podcast I run or whatever. And it's the nature of developing a relationship. And this is what so many people like this. So the kind of topic that Mike laid out for today, and I know we're getting close on time or need to wrap it up, but it was risk aversion in business, right? And link building was another component of it. But business, like until you understand that business is about a relationship where someone makes a decision and you provide value, what value can you provide? Understand that. And you can't provide all the value. What you really need to do is to understand the value you can provide and put it out there, and
Do it well.
you're going to wind up generating other relationships where you might see other value you can contribute or build together and all that kind of thing. So that my parting kind of words for today.
No, that's a great way to end it. I mean, it's the same reason why Brad and I aren't launching e-commerce sites by ourselves or anything, because that's a lot of work that it's not what we want to do. And so
I'm not going to source products for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just like it comes down to resource and value offered. And it's a very valid question. I'm glad you asked it.
Very much.
Because it's very, very valid. And there was the warning about someone buying a site that got pulled the PBN got pulled. I've seen that happen with other things, and we've recovered people with that, and it happens. So yeah, you got to do your due diligence on everything and use that kind of knowledge that we just talked about to do that due diligence. That's why people should not buy websites without the proper consultation, honestly. See you guys next week. Thank you all. Appreciate it, G-Man. We'll see you guys.
See you guys.
You're on, fellas.